Milton, another major Florida threat this week. Well, the Atlantic hurricane season really is starting to bite, and this time it's Tropical Storm Milton that's intensifying quite substantially in the western part of the Gulf of Mexico, and it's now expected to strike central Florida as a major hurricane later this week, probably on Wednesday. 22.7 degrees north, 94.4 degrees west at present. A developing 65 mile per hour tropical storm. Recon were recently in the storm and currently estimating pressure around 990 millibars, moving just a smidge south of east at 4 miles per hour. As of 12 p.m. this early afternoon in Tampa and Miami and along the whole eastern time zone this October 6th. Well, if you remember the Kirk update that I produced yesterday, you'll notice that the wind field on this one is completely different. It's the same scale, but much, much smaller. The wind field on this storm, Milton, up to 50 nautical miles so far in the southeastern quadrant. It will expand, but it is a much smaller storm. There is a tropical storm warning from Celestun to Cabo Cotoche on the northern tip of the Yucatan, and a tropical storm watch extending round to Cancun. It is 353 kilometers from Tampico, Mexico, 5:39 from Merida, 12:37 from Havana, Cuba, 13:33 from Tampa, and 14:81 from Miami. Now the storm, a lot of interest obviously in the Tampa Bay area and the areas that have been beleaguered by Hurricane Helene recently, but it could still impact anywhere along the western coast of Florida, including further south. A powerful hurricane is expected later this week with winds of over 120 miles per hour possible. As I mentioned there in the text, whilst the landfall location is very uncertain at present, the large populations of the Tampa Bay area and other areas of western Florida well within the cone, and a pretty clear cut that they're going to get at least storm impacts. Just how strong is the big question mark. Well, here's our best guess forecast over the next few days as we take a look at this early week. You can see it drifting just north of the Yucatan, then it sweeps up northeasterly, gets picked up by a front, and then it moves through Florida, slicing through, moving northeasterly, and then it tries to head off towards the northeast, but eventually it just looks like it might die off somewhere towards Bermuda. That forecast is not set in stone either at all. It could still stall out near the Bahamas and head a little bit further south as a weakening extratropical remnant. Currently 65 mile per hour winds, a little bit eager there I was. National Hurricane Center, of course, giving that 65 mile per hour estimate. ADT has some catching up to do. The Dvorak estimate's currently only at about 55 to 60 miles per hour. Recon got winds of just over 60 miles per hour earlier, and 65 is a decent shout. Well, they're expecting it to become a hurricane later this evening, so it really is well on its way already. This was the 10 a.m. Central Time forecast cone, and they're calling for 4 major hurricane points there, those 4 M's, signifying a Category 3 storm for that period, and then slamming into Florida. So the forecast models, the National Hurricane Center and our projection are all quite similar, although the GFS there, that last model run, takes it further north right into Tampa Bay on that forecast. The Hurricane Center cone was just a little bit further south towards Sarasota, but this particular run takes it right through Tampa Bay, then moving northeasterly, obviously towards Orlando, pretty much along Interstate 4, and then out over the open Atlantic. There it is again, a strong storm there, borderline Category 3 at least at landfall, although perhaps a slight crumb of comfort so far is that the National Hurricane Center cone has the storm on a weakening trend just a little bit before it makes landfall, but that obviously doesn't really comfort us when we saw the forecast for Helene a couple of weeks ago, when we thought it might have done a bit of weakening before its landfall. Well, it didn't really. But certainly in terms of rainfall, and we'll stop the comparisons there, certainly this storm will be a lot smaller. It'll be much more compact. It may have more of a shot at intensifying in the short range, but of course it may be more susceptible to weakening again later on. But look, very high amounts of rainfall on that northern side once it moves inland, affecting the northern parts of Florida there, sort of towards the Gainesville area on that particular run, but it could still go quite a bit further south than what that GFS was projecting. But as it is on that last run, I mean, anywhere in Florida really on the peninsula could see up and above 6 inches of rainfall, 150 millimeters, but some isolated locations could get amounts exceeding double that. You can see 13 inches there north of Tampa, 8 inches on the southern side in Sarasota, and getting towards 8 inches as well towards the Miami area north of there towards Jupiter, getting up towards 8 inches there, 200 millimeters, but maximum amounts up to 13 inches and even higher amounts offshore. Obviously, there's a lot of heat energy with very warm sea surface temperatures all the way up until landfall. It might decline just slightly before it reaches land, and that may have been caused a little bit by Helene, but not very much, it has to be said. Sea surface temperatures looking very good all the way, at least 27 degrees Celsius. These numbers read a little bit low actually, and temperatures will be quite good on the other side as well, but the National Hurricane Center are expecting that it will start a post-tropical transition as it gets picked up by a front. Well, here it is right now on satellite imagery, and you can see that cloud really bulking up. At the very beginning of that loop there, you saw a little bit of a curve. I don't know whether that is what might end up being the eye or not, but certainly blowing up large amounts of convection today, a sure sign of a developing tropical storm, but no clear signs of a defined eye wall yet. Obviously, that's the last thing we want to see, but certainly looking good with the amount of energy clearly on show with those very high cloud tops blowing up. You can already see it's got a big trail on its northeastern side as we look at this star imagery extending in towards the Florida Panhandle region. It's starting to take a look of a October storm. Quite often they are lifted up by fronts and they're attached to them, and then they get swung along and threaded through into Florida, as this storm will be doing in the next few days. So that it will be impacting somewhere. The big question is exactly where is going to get the biggest impacts. Well, that's still a big question mark, but obviously it is a massive concern after recent storms that we are having yet another one, I'm afraid. Certainly the outlook looks good for the intensification, although quite a bit of uncertainty about just how strong Milton will get. One or two models forecasting that it could get really towards the upper echelons. Of course, everyone's talking about the HAFS models, although they did exaggerate Helene as well, so I would be very cautious about supporting those model runs. Again, they're calling for an extremely powerful storm out of this one. It certainly could go a fair distance, though, as it heads on towards the coast of Florida. It's got about, 3 days, I think, of potential rapid intensification window. Cloud tops into the -80s in a few spots there as well. And quick look at the radar before we finish. You can see a little bit of the storm from various viewpoints from Mexico and from Texas, showing just a little bit of that core. Hard to see properly, but certainly getting the appearance of a decent tropical storm.
Become an Ultimate Fan today.